Scientists tell us and astrophysicists tell us that 85% of the universe is completely invisible to us. And I remember the first time I read that, I was like, then how do we know it's there if it's invisible to us? Like, what are we talking about here? But the reality is we know those things are there, like black holes, for instance, because of the effects it has on everything else around it. And so we know that dark matter exists because and that's kind of our way to explain something that we can't see but we know is there. Matter is there that is invisible to our eyes because of how it affects everything around us, how light bends around it or things are sucked up into it like a black hole. We know that it exists because of kind of what it does to everything else around it. It's not dissimilar to what Billy Graham said about the wind. He said, I can't see the wind, but I can feel the effects of the wind. And I bring that up today because we're going to talk about something that's a little bit touchy today. And you might have to give me just a little bit of runway here to get off the ground with this because it's kind of confrontational. And it's talking about people and when we see something in someone that we don't like. But my perspective on this is that many times people are like dark matter. We don't know what's going on really in their life. We see only a little tiny percent of what's happening in their life. And we judge them on what we see, what little data we have. But the interesting question is what we don't see. What has brought them to this point? The unseen things, the pain, the trauma, their history, the struggles that they have. We don't know what's going on. And so if we judge them based on only what we know, which is very limited, we are apt to make a wrong judgment. And I would offer to you, other than looking in the mirror and really knowing that person, and struggling sometimes to really know that person, how well do we really know what's going on under the surface in someone's life? So many times we judge someone and their actions or what they do, their behavior, their intentions, based on incredibly limited data. Data that's so limited that it's a little bit embarrassing when someone says, well, why do you believe that about this person? And we kind of scratch our heads and go, and mumble something that doesn't really work. Now, I need to first put this out there, lest you worry about this part. Jesus says don't judge, but he doesn't say don't judge because truth doesn't matter. Jesus says don't judge, and I think he teaches us that because we don't have all the information. We are very limited beings, and we all struggle with this. So I think Jesus is really saying don't judge, not because truth isn't important, but because the most important part of someone's story, the most shaping part of their story might be completely invisible to your eyes. You are just completely ignorant of what brought them to this point. And so to judge them in that moment on that limited data is a very poor decision. But even saying all that, we tend to judge. Our culture is a culture of judgment, right? I don't know if you, so I'm going to really date myself, but in the beginning days of the internet, there was a website called Hot or Not. Does anybody remember Hot or Not? It would put a picture up there and you would say Hot or Not. It's kind of the predecessor to those dating apps, I guess. I'd never used a dating app because, Yahoo Personals was what they had back in my day. And then dating apps were new, but, left or right. You're swiping left or right. It was the same kind of thing, the Hot or Not setup. But, man, we are just about judgments. What shows do we love? We love, like, the Judge Judys of the world. We love to see those things. We love to see American Idol when, Simon can just be like, you're awful, you're terrible, you're the worst human being. We love the cook shows, right? What is this garbage you're serving me? Are you garbage? We just love judgment for some reason. We're just all tied up in it. It is so entertaining to us to watch other people get judged. We don't want that to be us. And I think there's a little cathartic moment for us when we're like, glad that's not me. We love judgment. We are enamored with it, entertained by it. And I think sometimes we judge because we think we know what's best for someone. Like we know better than they do. And so you shouldn't do that because I wouldn't do that in my situation. Or Sometimes judgment flows from fear, from frustration. What I don't understand, I judge because it scares me a little bit that I don't understand that. Or I'm very fearful of something and frustrated with something, and maybe I want to control all the outcomes. And so my desire to control outcomes makes me judge other people and their actions. And most of us have a tendency to be very harsh on other people and very graceful with our own decisions. Like, we're very kind to me and very harsh on other people. Or sometimes we're very nice to the people we like, and the people we don't like, we're very harsh in our judgments towards. And so when Jesus says these words, do not judge, it's important that we understand the context of what he's talking about. And it's important that we understand that he's not getting on to us, like naughty, naughty. He's not slapping our wrist, right? He's not getting on to us. What he's doing is he's inviting us to see the way that he sees. He's inviting us to have a different perspective. He's giving us freedom. And that's what he's always been about. We sing songs about him breaking chains and setting us free on the cross. This is another case where he's trying to set us free from the cultural norm. He's trying to set us free from what everyone else is doing, their fascination with judgment. He's trying to set us free from that because I'll tell you, that is nothing new that was created for television. It goes all the way back to the religious people of Jesus' day, the Pharisees and Sadducees, who are judging people constantly, looking down their nose at people, especially the poor, especially women, especially those that don't have a lot of property or political clout, just looking down on them. And instead, he invites us to be free from trying to manage other people's choices, free from comparison and the illusion that we're responsible for other people's choices, free from resentment, real freedom. In our text today, we are wrapping up the Sermon on the Mount. We've been 8 weeks in the Sermon on the Mount. We wrap up today in Matthew chapter 7 with a look at what Jesus teaches on judgment. And there's some things maybe you've heard in culture before, or if you've been in a Bible study, maybe you've heard some of this before. But I want to give you a little bit of new breath into what Jesus teaches here about, because I think the expansion of his teaching, not just the do not judge, we stop there sometimes, but where he kind of gives the illustration for that, it's really meaty. There's a lot there. And so I want to dive into that because I think what he's doing is he's not discarding truth at all. He's not discarding right and wrong. He's not throwing any of that away, but what he's absolutely doing is he is saying you have a very limited vision, and when you judge others in that way, you're not seeing clearly. There's stuff below the surface. There's dark matter in the story that you don't see. And that's why he says not to judge. So it begins with removing our own blinders. And I want to look in Matthew chapter 7 with you. Jesus, in this section, is talking about not judging others. And so we're going to read verses 1 through 5 here because he kind of sets this standard and he gives a great kind of illustration for that as well. So check this out. Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. So automatically, right there, you have this first section that is kind of saying, look, you better be careful because when you judge others, that's the standard you'll be judged by. So be careful that you don't be very graceful with yourself and very harsh on everyone else. That's not how mercy, grace, and peace works. Verse 3, this is where he really digs into this example. And I've heard this so many times. It's even kind of in our culture, but I think there's something deeper going on here. Listen to this. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Now, to do that, I think is either impossible or very nearly impossible. What he is setting up the task is what he is saying, because he's saying you shouldn't judge, and do not judge others is the first word there, right? In the first sentence, do not judge others. And then he says, but if you're going to judge, here's what you got to do. You've got to remove the log in your own eye first. Now, the reason that's difficult to do is no one in here thinks you have a log in your eye right now. Not one of us thinks we have a log in our eye. That's such a silly thing, right? I mean, some of us might think, yeah, I might have something in my eye. But a log? A plank? No, obviously not. So no one is self-aware enough to know that we have that. So removing that, how difficult would that be to do? Jesus wants us to get this picture. Again, do not judge, not because there's no such thing as right and wrong, but because you don't have the whole picture. And you're looking for that tiny speck in someone's eye, but you're blinded. He's literally, I mean, if you had a log in your eye, I don't know, I don't think you're passing the driver's test, right? I mean, you can't see anything. If you have a log in your eye, a speck, okay, you can look around. But a log, you're blind. So how do we judge when someone else's story is invisible to us and we don't know what they've gone through even that day to bring them to this part where we don't agree with their behavior, we don't agree with their choice, we don't agree with their decision, but we don't know what has gone on to that point. We only see from our perspective, and when we only see from our perspective, we say, well, I would never do that. Well, of course you wouldn't, because that might not have ever been a choice in front of you. Right? I mean, sometimes I look down on billionaires. You ever do this? Well, I wouldn't have done that over there at Microsoft or Apple. And we're like, yeah, you didn't have that choice, friend. That wasn't a big deal for you because you never had that choice to make in the first place. And that's how we are with this. We see people on the little microscopic level in our family, in our lives, in our church, in our city, at work, at school, and we say, well, I don't agree with that decision, without fully comprehending what it was that brought them to that point. Jesus here brings this idea out. He says, why are you worrying about this speck in your friend's eye? And how dare you pick on that speck when you can't even see? You're so blinded. John 8:7, he says a similar thing. He says, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone. He could not have spoken more clearly to a culture fascinated with canceling and taking one another out, trying to ruin people's lives, trying to take them down. He couldn't have spoken any more clearly to say, look, you don't even know what's going on. And if you are without sin, then you attack the people based on your religious fervor, based on your legalistic fervor. But what happened in that story? They all dropped their stones and walked away because they realized not a single one of them could have claim to that. And if those super religious, judgmental people realize that, then we also need to fall into line with what Jesus is teaching here and realize we have no right to take vengeance out on someone for their actions when we too have guilty hearts. Romans 2:1, Paul teaches the Roman church in a similar way. He says, when you say they are wicked and should be punished, you are condemning yourself, for you who judge others do these very same things. Maybe not to the same degree, maybe not to the same exact moment, but he's saying you have faults too. We judge what we fear many times, what we don't understand. And when we make judgments like this, we judge others so we don't have to face the things in us that are broken. Have you ever thought about that? Some of the people that are on these biggest crusades in our world, that are out there just fighting the good fight against things, are not dealing with some of the stuff in their life. I mean, how many times does that have to come out in the news? That big politician, that big CEO that everybody thought was on top of the world and had everything figured out. And then, they didn't have it figured out. And we're surprised every single time. But we could trace that back in history, all the way back to the greatest leaders of the Roman Empire. And we could go bump, 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 history. Why, how do we not? Our amnesia is insane with this. But it just happens so often throughout history that it ought to be a warning to us. It ought to speak to us in that sense. That many times, judgment is easy. Much easier than dealing with what I need to deal with. Much easier than dealing with what God has put on my plate. And it's easy to look at and be critical of others and the speck in their eye when I have a log in my own. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said it this way. He said, what upsets people is not things themselves, but judgments about these things. One of the core Stoic philosophies is basically this idea of changing your perspective on things because the war is up here in your mind. You're not really upset about that behavior. You're not really upset about that thing in the world. You're upset about what you've made up the story to be about that thing in the world. I saw a funny thing the other day that was a guy saying that his wife got up after having a bad dream and was really upset about what he said in her dream. And she was like hitting him on the arm and saying, how come you said that? And he's like, I didn't say anything. You were asleep. And she was upset about his actions in her nightmare. And like, sometimes we're that way. We deal with life that way. We're not really upset with what's going on in reality. We're upset instead with kind of what we've made up the story to be in our mind. And I mean, this is evident and clear in social media and in conspiracy theories where people just get so wrapped up in this fictional account of what could have happened, right? And they're so wrapped up within that they get so angry that they're willing to take actions that are just to the rest of us wild and many times illegal. And we go, what could have captured your heart that much to make you do that? It's because, just like the Stoics said, it's not reality. It's not the thing they're angry about. It's what they've told themselves and wrapped up in their mind. And so it's all good and fine to understand this truth, right? To be taught this and to go, okay, I can process that and I understand that. But I think the real difficult part here comes with, well, what do I do about this? Like, how do I accept Jesus' invitation to stop judging people and to start being more reflective and think about things more and contemplative? How do I accept that invitation? And what does this look like practically? And so here's what I'm kind of going to talk about and land on today with this practice, is for us to practice this week, to live and to let others live. If the reflex, the natural kind of reflex is to punch back, to judge others, maybe we practice letting go. Maybe we practice just kind of, working on myself. When I feel those need to control outcomes or others' behaviors or to fix them, when I feel the need welling up in me to judge the intentions of the heart of someone that I have no clue why they're making that choice. I don't know the dark matter in their life. I don't know what's beneath the surface. Maybe I just start to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And I say maybe a prayer. What if I just said, God, I pray that you would help me in this. I release them to you and their actions and their choices. And instead, God, I want you to help me work on me. Help me rewire my brain. Help me trade condemnation for curiosity and compassion. Help me to be someone that doesn't judge others. I don't know that you can just will this into existence. I think it's probably too difficult to do that. I know a lot of us try to do that with our lives, but what if instead of just trying to make it happen, you went to God and asked for his help on this? Break my heart for what breaks yours, God. Help me to see others the way that you see them. Because how difficult would it be for us to be like Jesus and to be nailed to a cross and to look down and say, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. You see, he didn't start saying, let's judge them, destroy them, their whole family, take them, just wipe them off the face of the planet, God. Should he, could he have said that? Would I have said that? All those things run through my brain. And I'm like, absolutely, I want vengeance on them. And their intentions are bad, and their hearts are evil, and they're just terrible people. I want to destroy them. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them. This is what it looks like to rewire this part of our brain and to trade condemnation for compassion and curiosity and understanding. This is not about compromising truth. Don't hear that. It's not about saying what is wrong is right all of a sudden, right? It's not about giving that up, but it is doing what Jesus did. Instead, he never compromised truth, but he always, always, always led with mercy. And if we are going to be like Jesus, I would say we have a long way to go. We have a lot to learn there. And it begins with practicing it. Just like you would practice for a sport, just like you would practice anything, it begins with practicing. The late Tim Keller, who was a pastor, said it this way once. He said, tolerance is not, he said, tolerance isn't about not having beliefs. There's a double negative there. It's hard to get out. All right. Tolerance isn't about not having beliefs. It is instead about how your beliefs lead you to treat people who you disagree with. So, tolerance is not about not having your beliefs and who you are and your core. It's not about that. It is instead about how you treat others. What does that cause you to do? There can be people that you vehemently disagree with. You're just like, they're over here on this issue and I'm over here on this issue. But what we're not allowed to do in the Jesus model of living, in the Jesus way, is to treat them poorly, to judge them, to do evil towards them, to hate them, to want bad things for them. It's just not a part of Jesus' perspective and philosophy. If the people that were being mean to his mama and his family, he was even like, Father, forgive them, then we've got to learn a lesson there from his way of living. A way of living that is not natural to us. The natural default way, the sinful way, is for us to judge others. Jesus invites us to a different way of living that is not easy and only can come by the aid of God's Spirit dwelling within us. What would it be like for me to look at people that I just completely disagree with, that I think are thinking about things all backwards? And you, when I say that, instantly across here, people are coming to your mind. You're just like, ugh, that neighbor who won't mow their grass, or that person that's on a different political spectrum, or Thanksgiving that you're already thinking about when it's this hot in the summer and who you're going to have to face. And you're already there. You're already thinking about that. That person, that face, that I just, ugh, their image is like I am just taking my fingernails down a chalkboard for you, right? Now, what if it would be like to reframe this for a moment and to realize they're a complex being just like you are, and they're at their first shot at being a human just like you are, right? They're still figuring out what it means to be a human being and how to live this life, and they're complex, and they have a history that you don't know all the background with, and they have dark matter things that are happening in their life that you don't know what's under the surface. And what would it be like to just for a second put a perspective around that and say, I want to think about them more like God does. I want to see them more like Christ does. And Christ died for them. Even if they're kicking and screaming against everything that he wants for their life, he still went to the cross for them. And so what would it be like to lay down my arms, to lay down my hate, my anger, my bad wishes for them, and instead say, I can do no harm. I want to pray about this, God. I want you to let them live their life, and I'll live mine, and God, help me work on me. Because ultimately, this is what Jesus said the world would identify us as his followers with. He said, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. He never said, they'll know you by your judgments. They'll know you when you stand up for yourself and demand things for you and yours. They'll know you by how loud you are and obnoxious you are when people make mistakes. No, none of that. He said they'll know you by your love. Now, imagine a church community where people expect to be seen and not sized up, not judged, not labeled, not put in categories. What if we became known as a group of people who were the most curious and compassionate people in the entire community? Where we saw someone that was clearly acting out, and instead of judging them and saying, no more, we said, you know what? Let's figure out what's going on underneath this picture here. When we saw people in the news that others were discarding and saying, oh, have nothing to do with them and get them out. And instead we said, no. We're going to look at them as a creation of God, and we're going to work against the stream of culture, against the stream of society, and instead we're going to figure out who they are and what's going on and what brought them to this point in their life. We want to see them through the eyes of Christ. Not the eyes of media, not the eyes of the news, not the eyes of the people that are the loudest in our world, that are hate-filled. Not the eyes of the people that won't look beyond the surface. Let us be the people that go deeper. Let us be the people that understand. Because at the end of the day, judgment is super easy when your mirror's broken, right? Judgment's really easy when you can't even see what's going on in your own life. What if we got real? And this is the part that I said was going to be difficult. You'd have to give me a little bit of runway with. But what if we laid down our ability, our desire to go after others, and instead we worked on this? We said the Lord's Prayer and meant it. That God's will would be done here on earth as it is already done in heaven. And what if we were willing to begin that process right now, you and I? Now, this is not easy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes practice, because it's not the default. The default is everything I just told you, the easy way, the thing the big crowds are going to do, the mob mentality. They're going to do all that. But what it takes to live in the way of Jesus takes a lot more reflection.